advisors who are with us today. Some of you were unable to join us yesterday, so we are delighted to have you here today. We had an informative and important presentations and discussions yesterday, and I anticipate more of the same today. These planning and work sessions provide us for in-depth presentations on topics and issues of value and importance to this board and to public education. I thank the staff in advance for the work time required for the planning and work session, in addition to the monthly board meeting, which we will have tomorrow. I will now read the ethics statement that is required of us. Board members are reminded that it is our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to any matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. If during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in the discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. I now recognize Dr. Maria Petrie Martin for a recap of our planning and work activities yesterday.
Good morning to our chairman, our vice chair, our board members, advisors, and to all those assembled. Yesterday, we had the opportunity to hear from the Ernst & Young team regarding the operational review, and then the rest of the afternoon, we had a discussion regarding low-performing schools and low-performing districts. Just to give you some highlights of the things that we discussed regarding our low-performing schools and districts, really go into policy DSTR 040. This is a policy that discusses the reform efforts for reoccurring low-performing schools. So in looking at the documents that you reviewed yesterday, as well as some of the questions and the topics we discussed, we will be looking at that policy and incorporating the feedback and the questions that you gave us yesterday into that policy. For example, you asked for more of a detailed timeline regarding the implementation of the reform models for our low-performing schools. You also wanted a component where the State Board of Education recognizes schools that are meeting expectations and including that in our documentation. You also asked about what supports exist for schools depending on which reform model that they select. You also wanted clarification regarding what happens when growth is not happening in a school. Also, you asked about what are the expectations for the ISD to take over more of the work of our low-performing schools. So those were questions and comments given to us that we will look to inform the revision of that policy. But also, you gave us feedback on the documents that we shared with you, which were very extensive and very complicated documents, but you asked that under considerations for the reform model, we also indicate that there's an identification phase of this work. So on that one long, extensive project management document we gave you, you want us to include an identification process. What does it look like to identify these schools? Second, for the LEA school watch list and warning list, you wanted us to add more information to indicate that this could be a school's first time being on that list. In other words, find a way to differentiate between those boxes of schools on the watch list and schools on a warning list. And then finally, you would like us to add an estimated timeline after the State Board of Education approves the achievement results and schools are notified that the schools may have 60 days, so give a specific number of days to respond or submit a plan for improvement. So those were the things that were discussed yesterday. We're going to pull all of this information. Of course, it will be included in the records from yesterday's discussion, and we'll be back. We will be back to show you how this work can be weaved into the policy that I mentioned earlier. We will head into today's agenda, but I did want to remind you of something very important. At the end of the day, we will be using technology, so we will ask you to use your devices in order to give us feedback on all of the different areas that we have discussed today. So just prepare yourselves as we head toward the end of today. We will be asking you to get on your devices and give us some additional feedback. Yes, ma'am.
I know we're not discussing this, but I assume we can continue to give you feedback on this, because one of the things that I think we need to do is come back to the big picture. And the big picture is, why are these schools having difficulties?
Yes,
and we didn't really address that yesterday. I know we've talked about some of that in the past, but whether it's, poverty or teacher quality or principal quality, I think we need to step back and look at the big picture of what's going on beyond what we're doing once they're in trouble.
So what we certainly can do, and I'm looking over at Dr. Townsend Smith, is ensuring that we may want to do an issues session as a recommendation that delves into those issues before we bring back policy. We can certainly do that. Step back.
That's my opinion.
Okay.
I don't know if there's
That in our
consensus around
notes.
that, but Dr. Townsend Smith can figure that out.
One other thought that I think I shared with you is taking a look at every place we can to tighten those timelines. I know they can opt in for that year of planning, but this could be 5 years before we decide that it's not successful. And a kid entering the kindergarten is in the 5th grade, 4th grade by then. And so maybe tightening those timelines and assuring that we're not going to hit a wall with some of the kids.
Anything else?
Yeah.
The Ernst & Young report was an enormous amount of information, and I'm not sure I absorbed it all. I know I haven't yet, but I do know that from a committee standpoint, some of the obligations that we have in some of these areas for improvement that we have, I just want to lift up that our committees, especially ours, from a business operations standpoint, has some things that were brought up. I think it would be very important for us to take swift action on and do what we can to support the transition or transformation management office in doing the best that they can, give them as many resources as they can. Specifically, there are a lot of positions open, and that we have to, with HR and just the process standpoint, that's going to be a real point of emphasis for our committee to make sure that we do everything with a sense of urgency. I think we've not probably lifted that up enough, and after reading the report and seeing some of the opportunities there, you can rest assured that we'll be very active on supporting the Department of Public Instruction on making sure that they have the resources that are allotted to them to do what they can. We cannot wait. That's one. But it was a very good report. It's just a lot to go through and to be able to say, and there's 17 other recommendations that are around that as well. Thank you.
And tied to Mr. Alcorn's point related to that, it would help me to know, based on those recommendations, where those recommendations lie or land in terms of committees. What maybe for the ES&P there may be 5 recommendations that are very pertinent to the work of that committee. So if there is some way that maybe the recommendations can be separated or assigned out to committees, that would truly help me begin to process what ES&P needs to be doing and moving forward with recommendations.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, one thing that I catch morphed, and Greg's comments made me think of this. Some of the conversation morphed into the second year of the biennium and the cuts that are part of that already approved budget. And if there's anything that's kind of really time sensitive before this board meets again, it would be that issue, because
Right.
they convene mid-May.
Right.
And so the time sensitivity around that is very important.
Right. Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Petrie Martin. Dr. Oxendine, please introduce the
Yes.
ES&P session.
Thank you, Chairman Kobe. It is my pleasure to introduce two individuals or three individuals who are going to give us a bit more information about a project that comes out of the State Advisory Council on Indian Education. And the purpose of this project, I'm certainly not going to steal their thunder, only to give a thumbnail. The purpose of this project and discussion around this project began about 3 or 4 years ago. And it grew out of discussion that our classroom teachers in North Carolina need additional resources or better resources to build an awareness about the American Indian culture in North Carolina. So as a result of that discussion, one thing led to another, and a couple or maybe three individuals, or probably the entire SACE, got together and decided we need to do something about it. We need to put this discussion into action mode. So I'm happy to introduce, coming before you today, is Ms. Cara Stewart, who coordinated the project, and she kind of led the way on it. So she's with us today, and she's going to come up momentarily. And Dr. Silver, who is the DPI liaison to SACE, is going to, I think, maybe navigate the presentation. And Dr. Connie Locklear, who is the current chair of the State Advisory Council on Indian Education, will be presenting right now. So we're more than happy to have you back, and this is kind of a follow-up to last month's meeting presentation by SACE.
Good morning, Chairman Kobe, board members, and Superintendent Johnson. It's our pleasure to be here before you today. We're having a little bit of technical difficulty, so I'm navigating the two, but we're going to go ahead and get started and hope that we'll be able to navigate through that. I'm pleased today, as the agency's liaison to the State Advisory Council on Indian Education, to be before you again today for them to go in depth with some of the work that they've been doing. One word that Dr. Petrie Martin said yesterday that's very important to the board right now is equity. And that's certainly something that I'm passionate about, and I know that this council is passionate about. Being a student from a high poverty, high minority community myself, who's been educated in this system, I know it's very important, and seeing that on both the teacher end and a student end. Without further ado, so that you have plenty of time to hear from the council members, I'm going to turn it over to the chair of the State Advisory Council on Indian Education, Dr. Connie Locklear. She's a member of the Lumbee Tribe of North Carolina. She is the director of the Public Schools of Robeson County's Indian Education Program. And basically for the next 30 minutes, she's going to give you an overview of the work and recognize some of the people who have been working on that. And then our plan is for Ms. Stewart, who spent several years as a member of the board herself and who was integral to this work, to actually walk you through parts of the module so you can see what our educators are being exposed to. I'm going to be over here on the side trying to make sure we can access everything, but I'm going to have Dr. Locklear go ahead and get you started.
Tanake Hashadeha. I greet you in the Siouan language. I said hello and happy to see you. Good morning, Chairman Kobe, Superintendent Johnson, fellow board members. Thank you for allowing us to be here today and to share our work with you again. The Culturally Responsive Teaching module about American Indians. This self-paced module is about 10 hours, and when teachers complete this module, they receive 1 general CEU credit. Culturally responsive instruction is a philosophy and accompanying implementation of instruction that purposely acknowledges, embraces, uses what each student brings culturally to the classroom. It is built on the foundation of relationship and respect, which is very important for all children. Culturally responsive instruction, resource web pages. This information has been presented at with Title I groups across the state, at the North Carolina Unity Conference, At the Collaborative Conference on Student Achievement, just recently, Dr. Susan Fairclough presented at the Collaborative Conference with a diversity panel, and at various schools. Our SACE Curriculum Responsive Instruction Committee began this work, as Dr. Oxendine stated, in 2013. The web pages went live in January of 2015. The purpose for this was to make sure that the information that teachers were providing for our students and about our culture was accurate. So it was the answer to answer the need, Native people giving voice to a lack of accurate education about American Indians. During that time, we received feedback and made adjustments. Teachers still need support to unpack the information, and I love this last statement. I'm an educator, always will be an educator, it doesn't matter what capacity I'll be in. Teachers want to teach well. Some of the reasons for this is that sometimes statements were made that were culturally insensitive. One of those that has been stated is sit Indian style. That's culturally insensitive. We would never say to a group of children, sit African American style, sit Caucasian style, sit Latino style. That's culturally insensitive. Or around Thanksgiving, I want all of you to come dressed as Indians. That's culturally insensitive. Teachers want to teach well, and sometimes things are spoken out of ignorance. And that's not a negative connotation, but that's just a lack of knowledge. So we wanted to make sure that the information that was given to teachers was accurate. That was the purpose. The development of this module, there were some very important, we have a couple individuals here, as we stated, Dr. Ryan Emanuel. Will you please stand? He was part of this. Dr. Ryan Emanuel is a professor at NC State. Dr. Susan Fairclough is a professor at UNCW. Miss Alicia Hunt Lowry is an NC State grad, and she works with SACS. Miss Tiffany Pearson is a teacher from Cumberland County Schools. Dr. Heather Dow Sellers is a professor from UNC Pembroke. And Miss Cara Stewart here, she's a teacher with Orange County Schools. As well as these were the people that were instrumental in the development of this. On SACE, we have two committees. We have the PD committee, and we also have the strategic committee. And that's the planning activities and so forth. But once these committees work, we come back together and we share what we have discovered and what we want to talk about. So there were other SACE members involved in the input and development of this module. We can't go without saying that this module idea came about through the thought process of Ms. Deborah Williams, who's the former Director of Special Projects, DPI Liaison to SACE. And also the online module development and support. I really want to toot the horn this morning, and I'm not getting a raise for doing this, and I'm not getting any accolades, but I really want to toot the horn of DPI. They have really been so helpful in making sure that this module has been put together with fidelity, and they have provided us all the resource. Dr. David Walbert, no, I'm going to get this last name wrong, so I'm going to say what she told us to call it. Just call me Dr. Sony. She is just wonderful. She came in, and every suggestion we had, she was willing to change with such politeness and professionalism. So she was great. Dr. Susan Silver, she has stepped into this capacity after Miss Deborah Williams left, and with all her other duties, she makes sure that SACE is represented well. So we're very proud of her. Dr. Kelly Briggs, who is her partner, and they work very well together. And I really want to shout out to Dr. Maria Petra Martin. Every meeting we have, she comes. That says a lot. Because when you have a faculty meeting, it's very important for your administrator to be there. She serves in that role, and we are so proud of her serving there and offering all the support that she does. And last but not least is our voice, Dr. Olivia Oxendine. We really appreciate you more than you know. So these people have been very instrumental in the development of this module. Now I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Cara Stewart.
Good morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Good morning. So I wanted to go back for just 1 minute and thank you all for having me here this morning. This has really been a work of the heart for me, from the development of the website itself, which is quite extensive, to the development of the module. So it's been
my work at the Heart for a number of years, probably going on 2 decades now. So I really appreciate you having me here and being interested enough to listen to what we have to say. And I am in the trenches every day as a reading specialist in Orange County Schools and a literacy coach. So I do hear a lot of input from teachers who are, you know, the boots on the ground. And I do hear a lot of input from teachers who come to our presentations for the State Advisory Council and for our culturally responsive instructional resources. I did want to go back to the website for just a moment. I'm sorry, please bear with me. So on the website itself, I just wanted to make sure you all knew it was there, make sure you all knew how to navigate it, and make sure that you were comfortable in letting people know about that, and just in case the question ever comes up. So if you go to the State Advisory Council on Indian Education website, and for those of you who have devices, if you wanted to do that while we get ready. And then if you scroll down on the left-hand screen, to where it says culturally responsive instruction, open right there. There's the whole orange bar will open behind you. And we did at the State Advisory Council go ahead and give a lot of information on culturally responsive instruction that is not necessarily geared only to Indian people, but geared to culturally responsive instruction for everyone. And this is for teachers who may feel like they want information about Native American resources, but perhaps they don't have a background in what that culturally responsive instruction actually means. So we do have a significant amount of information there. As you go down into the teachers page and the administrators page, you'll see that it gets more detailed, and it is actually dealing with mostly all, actually, Native American resources. So I went to the Collaborative Conference on Student Achievement several years ago. I think it was 2015, and presented there. I went to several different tribal meetings. I've been to different schools presenting this webpage. I've been to the Unity Conference, as have other people on the council. And what we found is that although we have what we consider all the resources somebody would need to pull this out and use it, teachers were finding it too dense. It was too much information and they didn't know where to start. So by listening to them, we decided to come up with the module. That was Deborah's idea. So to get to the module, every day I log into NC EdCloud for doing what I need to do in the classroom, so going down to True North Logic. If you go up here to professional development, and I believe Ms. Silver has given logins that you can use. Is that correct? If you, yeah. So if you wanted to explore this further later, you can do that, and if you don't have it, she will give you the guest login. I'm logged in under mine right now. So mine, the course is right here. I did go ahead and take the course. It's not showing on there. It went out. I went ahead and took the course for credit because I figured as long as I had put years into working on it and developing it, I might as well get credit for that. So I did take the course so that I could get that credit. And I think if you are using the guest login, you would just search for the course number. I believe it's 8048. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you could just pull that up and it would come right up. I don't want to pull that plug out again if that's what happened. Yeah. So when you first get to the course, what I wanted to show you
we need the power.
Oh, okay, all right. So I was looking for the PowerPoint. She said you do have this PowerPoint in front of you. So I'm on the module framework screen, and so I'll just walk you through that from your device. So we decided that, again, because a lot of teachers might not have background in culturally responsive instruction, the first thing to do would be to give an introduction to that. So that is our goal 1. And it is a shorter part of the module than the rest of it. So we gave that background. We thought after that, we're again going to be looking at teachers who might not have any idea, and I do run into this all the time. I've worked at multiple schools. Teachers who are shocked that there's more than the Cherokee and the Lumbee in the state, or don't have any idea that American Indians exist today. I even had a principal, a new principal at the school I worked for, say, I didn't know there were Indians in real life. So, you know, to know that all the 8 tribes are here is a really important thing, and that we're here today. So that's your goal 2, and that's the second part of the module. The third part of the module deals with all the various pieces that American Indian people face, whether we're in the schools as students or teachers, or whether it's our children or grandchildren, nieces or nephews who are in the schools. So as we're looking down through those, we have some real-life student stories that I would like to show to you. If we can navigate to that in a minute. We have Thanksgiving. That is a whole issue. Stereotypes and misconceptions are huge. So I'm all about stereotype busting. So we have a lot of methods for teachers to understand and recognize stereotypes, and how to go about accurate instruction, and the impact on students. And we actually have the teachers analyze their own classrooms and some accurate books about American Indians to inform their instruction. And then at the end, we have some models that we used of different states who have absolutely amazing lessons that incorporate integration of different content areas, as well as teach from a Native perspective. So you know that North Carolina is one of the states on the east of the Mississippi that has the highest Indian population. So we would be analogous to those states that we pulled the lessons from. And we had them synthesize everything. So to bring it all together, give them modern resources. We even gave them things like online magazines and fashion things so that they could see, and especially for high school kids, to see what is Native America today. So that was our idea in laying it all out. So now we come back up here to the screen, and here you see it as a teacher would pull it up. At the very beginning, you know, there's the using Moodle thing, the participation guidelines, and what you would need to know technology-wise to navigate it. The syllabus is exactly what I just showed to you. The instructional goals and learning objectives are on there also. And then the alignment with the North Carolina standards, that is just what teachers are trying to meet with their PDPs. So this is the first section, culturally responsive instructional teaching, so they would just click on it. And again, it just gives a brief background, brief overview, and there are videos embedded. There are actually 2 student videos from the Student 6, Chapel Hill Carrboro City Schools. They spoke quite eloquently about what it means to be a student of color in the classroom and how teachers can help. And then there's supplemental resources. You'll see these journal activities have a little pencil icon. That is where we want the teachers to respond in a journal format. The discussion is where they post online, and there's comments they can leave. And then we almost always give supplemental resources if they want to know more. And back to teachers want to teach well, they almost always want to know more. And then at the bottom is the navigation for the discussion. You can just go to the bottom and navigate to the next thing. And here's all the comments that have been left on the very first part.
You can see quite a few teachers have logged in, and that journal response is what makes it more interactive, so we can get an idea of what they're thinking as they're processing that information.
Mm-hmm. And I did go through all the comments in the last couple of days and pulled out a few notable ones for you that I'll share later. So this is the part that Dr. Ryan Emanuel, professor from NC State, worked on, the American Indians. And there you see all those insignias for all of the 8 state recognized tribes. And he's dropped a map in there to show where everything is. And there is also a video on that section. This is the video done by the North Carolina Commission of Indian Affairs on all the tribes, after we have a brief summary of all the tribes.
As Cara scrolled through that, I just want to emphasize how critical that is, and that's one of the recommendations that's in the report that's up for your approval tomorrow, is that these modules be made aware to North Carolina educators, who are certainly in classrooms, but also for our staff and educators who are here at the agency as well. One of the stories that one of our council members tells is about a consultant coming to share information who taught social studies, certainly part of which is American Indian Studies and American Indian culture, who left off her tribe. And so we have to ensure that we are making sure that we're sending accurate information as well. So that's why the council was so adamant about, let's have a brief section in there just to say, not an in-depth analysis, but just to make people aware, here's who's represented in this state.
And just to note, as you go through that, our chairperson, Dorothy Crow, was quite concerned that our website, the Saponi, I Am Saponi, does not currently work. That's because we're working on a new fabulous website. So if you go to that link, it doesn't currently work, but within, by the end of June, it should be working for our tribe with a new website. So here's the Commission of Indian Affairs video again, and your journal activity. One teacher at my school did complete this on one of the snow days when he was at school. He said it was amazing. He loved it. He pulled out one of the real-life student stories that's on the screen there and just kept talking to me about how he just really could relate to this kid, Robert, and it was just amazing. And this is number 6 as you scroll down. A first grade student in a North Carolina classroom was doing the Indian unit. They were told to pick an Indian name based on their perception of their own character. And the one student in the class came home and said, was confused. I'm sorry, I have to pause for a minute. That student is actually my son. His name's Jamie. And I was working in the school, and he said, "But Mom, I am Indian, and my name is Jamie." And so I said, "You are correct." And I went and talked to the teacher, and I spoke with the principal. And the resolution was that Jamie could either not participate and not be in his classroom and be in my classroom instead during that time, or he could keep his own name. And I didn't want him to miss instruction, so I chose to let him keep his own name. So in that classroom, with one Indian child in the class, all the other kids had names like Running Deer and Little Princess, while my Indian son, Jamie, had Jamie on his name tag. Fortunately, Jamie is fine. He is now 25 years old and in the Peace Corps in Albania, but I want to tell you the impact that has on a child. He started to pull back from the Indian community at that point. So what we're having the teachers do here is think about the impact that even a small thing like that has on a child. And one of our journal activity questions is, how does this impact the student's relationship to school? Do they still believe school is valid and their teachers are correct after that? And I can tell you in my son's case that was the point where he decided, no, teachers don't really always know what they're talking about. And that was first grade.
Ms. Cara, I would like to interject here just a minute. Dr. Susan Fairclough also shared a story. She has pulled her child out of public schools because of an issue similar to that. That her child was told that she was not Indians and Indians did not exist anymore. And those things really It sounds simple, and then she was given the same response. Well, you can pull her outline this time if she's not going to dress up as an Indian. You don't have to let her come to school that particular day if she can't dress up as an Indian. Those things really hurt the American Indian community. They hurt us as parents. As she said, it's very detrimental to that child. My daughter, when she went away to college, someone said, "You're not a real Indian because you don't have a name like Running Bull." Sorry, that's a passion of mine too.
The point is, this is what the students are being taught in school instead of accurate information. So whether the child is Native or whether the child is white or African American or Hispanic, we want them to have accurate information. If you look at number 4, a 10th grade student, his history teacher told the class that there were very few Native Americans left and they were considered history. So, you know, the impact on that student also was huge. So if you see the journal activity, how does the student story affect the student's perception of the teacher, the classroom, the school, and their relationship to it? So when we think about the achievement of American Indian students, considering these kind of things are what they face on an almost daily basis in the school and out of the school, it's kind of not too surprising that the achievement is what it is in a way. The next topic we covered was Thanksgiving, which again is huge. I cringe all through November, being in the schools. And even when I am in the schools, I still and have done my best to educate teachers, and they are receptive. There are still some times when I'll see, you know, the headdresses with the feathers walking down the kindergarten hallway because it's fun. So the Thanksgiving discussion board is also there. I really do feel like the people who took this course are learning a lot. And I can show you some of the comments coming up to the stereotypes and misconceptions part. Again, we have linked in here things that we want the teachers to read. They are short articles online, 10 things teachers shouldn't do, common Native American stereotypes, and we have the teachers do a reasonable amount of thinking and responding to these things. How do stereotypes affect any race? How do stereotypes affect Native Americans? And then there's a supplemental activity that they can do with their students to have their students be more equity-minded. Mascots, again, is another big issue, so we have a whole section on mascots with a journal activity and a video. 2 videos, and if you haven't seen Roy Shabala's Love You Some Indians, that's why I put that in there. This is an amazing spoken word video. And then they respond on doing the typical classroom play on Indians. So again, putting all the pieces from the website into a format that the teachers are walked through, almost like holding their hands through the most important parts of the website is what this module is. And again, this TED Talk, she kind of, Gabrielle Scrimshaw, she encapsulates all of the pieces in a way of what we've talked about through the whole course in her TED Talk. So I think that's a valuable thing for the teachers also. So this one, what are your next steps? This was one of the most interesting comment threads. So let me pull up. And they can respond to each other's comments also, as you see here. We have, is it 392 teachers have actually taken this module so far, and of course not all of them actually post to the discussion boards, but a number of them do, and a number of them respond on each other's comments. Although I teach Native American students, I still have to be aware of how things are addressed to them. I need to make sure that I'm giving them the truth about their history, make sure they understand their own culture, and again, that's also a tribal and parental responsibility as well. I will make sure to give the actual facts about Thanksgiving. Our school literature continues to decimate the indigenous culture. We stereotype and caricature native culture to suit our purpose. So those are some of the comments. We asked them to talk about the next steps in their classroom, the next steps that they were thinking about, the next step in their instructions. We must know the facts and present them to students, unbiased discussions about stereotypes, how to overcome them, be sensitive to the cultures of others. And the thing is, you know, when teachers and others teach these things, and they teach reinforcing of stereotypes, they think they are correct. They've been giving a miseducation. So at what point does it stop? Now I'll just click on this one more. So all the resources we've given them in here, all the contemporary magazines they can look at, contemporary blogs, the accurate information, links to reviews of children's literature that feature Native American themes, notably American Indians in Children's Literature by Debbie Reese. That blog is invaluable. All of these things speak to, here are your accurate resources. So this is our attempt to try to head off more stereotypes. And then we have the lessons from Alaska and Montana up. And these actually go into, this is the integrated lessons with different topics that I was telling you about. And here's Shanika Mitchell again. The lessons, these lessons go into more detail of Native American cultures, past to present. Many of the lessons I have taught only teach certain things and not the whole truth to some concepts. These take the large population into consideration when developing lessons. I can incorporate more of the research learned from Native American culture in North Carolina. Responded to by Jean Wyatt. In my 32 years of teaching, there hasn't been any requirement to teach American Indian heritage. So one of the comments and feedback that I have heard from people in my tribe, people in other tribes, through the just all kinds of venues that I go to and organizations I'm involved in native-wise, is that people wonder if this module couldn't be made a requirement, at least in Title VII LEAs, and or made a requirement for newly licensed teachers. I realize that thinking out to all the teachers that are licensed out there now, that's a big unwieldy octopus to consider. But if teachers have to get certain licensure through this organization, it seems like perhaps they would be able to be required. If they're teaching in North Carolina, you need to learn about all of its population. Or if you're teaching in a Title VII or Title VI, sorry, the number changed, the American Indian LEA, that perhaps those teachers in particular could be required to take this module. I know that one of my people that I formerly worked with in Person County, she's now the principal at one of the schools, she did require all of her teachers at her school in Person County to take the module, and they did. And she felt it was very valuable to them. So that's some of the thoughts we have from the Native American community. And this principal in Person County, she's not Native, she's white, as are most of her teachers. And then we have the North Carolina resources and choosing in, culturally responsive instructional materials, which is probably the biggie. So this section, you probably felt like I've kept you here 10 hours already. You probably feel like you've earned one CEU already. But here's the big section here. So this big section, if they don't have the accurate materials, they can't use them to teach. If they don't know where to find them online, they don't know how to tell the difference between accurate and non-accurate, they're not teaching the right thing. So a big push of mine in all the schools I've worked at, and certainly in the school I'm working at now, is to update their book rooms and their literature to reflect everybody and to reflect the school's population. and to update it and bring it out of like the 70s and 80s into today so that everybody has the right information. And that's what this whole section is geared out. So we give links, we give activities, tips for choosing books and resources. And then this is the activity where they evaluate a book, they evaluate their own library, and then an optional thing is they can read a couple of reviews from Dr. Debbie Reese's blog, American Indians in Children's Literature. And she is now a verb, as she says. People are now saying in the publishing world, have you Debbie Reesed this book? So she is considered the gold standard.
And that piece is really critical because there are lots of resources out there. Right? If you were to Google Native American literature or books for children about American Indians, you would get a lot of things, some of which would be accurate, some of which would be inaccurate. And certainly the council represents a body of representation of American Indians. Of course, we have varied thoughts as well, but it's a reliable source for teachers to come to. The other piece of that is that schools have finite resources. So as they're selecting materials, it's important that they are able to check against something so that their dollars are being used in the best value possible, because that money for textbooks might not come again. So how do we help guide them so that they're making some good choices? Because as this started out with, all teachers want to teach well. Mm-hmm. We have to have the resources and help guide them. So I think that was the thinking behind this module.
It certainly was. And it's not just textbooks, and we're not just talking about social studies. We're talking about everyday books. And it's huge because we're talking about the hardbound books for the actual learning commons or media centers or libraries. That would be single copies. We're talking about 6-packs for the book rooms for guided reading. We're talking about classroom libraries. And we're talking about companies that still publish books like The True Story of Pocahontas, which is anything but. And that's a little guided reader for like second or first graders. So, and it's used all the way up to 5th grade for lower readers. So, you know, teachers want to teach well. They think, oh, Scholastic published this, it must be good. So we need a way to check against that. And I can't be in every school and be the only one who knows about this. So we want to educate teachers to do this for themselves. And I think it's the last part, you're probably going to cheer, but focus on contemporary American Indians. And this is also huge because I feel like every time Native Americans are brought up, it's in the context of history and social studies. And that's an ocean. That has been an ongoing tsunami. So every single drop we can put in about, no, wait, there are Lumbee people today, Saponi people today, Coharie people today, and here's what they look like, and here's what they do, and here's what they belong to, and here are their careers. That we need to do that 5 times more than we need to focus on the history, because that's where the stereotypes are coming from, is the history. So we gave a lot of resources, and you can see down this whole list, alphabetized. We gave a lot of resources on where teachers can go for everybody from elementary age to college age for any interest, whether the interest is fashion or literature or music or news or comics or whatever it is, politics, it's there.
We're going to switch back over, and Dr. Locklear is going to close us out. As we're doing, there's in your PowerPoint that you have on your agenda, we're going to switch back over to it. Lawrence is going to do that for me. But there are 2 quotes, and I'll just read while she's coming up, that came from the course, because I think that feedback is so important, because we can think one thing, but what do educators who this model is designed for think? So here was one comment. This course was very beneficial to me and provided a huge amount of activities I can use in the classroom setting. That's what it's all about, getting this back down to the classroom setting. These lessons really incorporate today's culture and how it would be meshed with the Native population. It talked about there are some great lessons here, and I would like to think I can use several of these within my own classroom. So that transfer of knowledge, if it was just up there and people say, yeah, that's nice, now I know more about American Indians, that's a tertiary level. We want to get to that deeper level of the transfer, and so that's the impact that Cara talked about and that I've heard used yesterday as well, getting it to this classroom level. Dr. Locklear, I'll turn it over to you to close us out.
The experts on culturally responsive teaching, we were looking to find experts in their thoughts. We wanted to look within our own state, within our own tribal communities. Dr. Brian McKinley Jones Braboy is Lumbee. He is President's Professor of Indigenous Education and Justice in the School of Social Transformation at Arizona State University. At Arizona State University is Senior Advisor to the President. He is the author of over 90 scholarly documents. His work has been supported by the U.S. Department of Education, the National Science Foundation, and many others, as you can see. And Dr. Susan Fairclough, she is of the Kahari tribe. She is a professor in the Educational Leadership Department at the University of North Carolina at Wilmington. Dr. Fairclough is a member of the Bureau of Indian Education Special Education Advisory Council and chair of the Technical Review Panel for the National Indian Educational Study. Both of these individuals were instrumental in ensuring that the American Indian population was innate. At one time, the American Indian students were not even included in NAEP, and both of these served on the NAEP committee at that time, and they were very instrumental in making sure that our students were represented in that study. Dr. Susan Fairclough still serves on the NAEP board. So when we got quotes, these are some quotes, and I'm not going to read them to you for the time. I'm just going to kind of highlight certain pieces. What Dr. Brayboy says is that when teachers, curricular schools provide this challenging and high-quality education that is connected and relevant to the culture, students are more likely to graduate academically prepared and not only connected to the dominant culture, but to their home culture, to their tribal communities. He also said, which is very powerful, and I want to reiterate this. This is something I brought my passion out at the last meeting. There is no evidence in Indian community that our parents and our communities do not want our children educated. Every parent and every ethnicity wants the best for their child. Every parent. And we are the same. What he says, though, is that communities are aware of the need and are engaged in this process. They just feel, our parents just feel, that learning should be engaging, that the instruction should engage the culture. They should not be isolated. They should not be taught in isolation. Those are Dr. Brian Brayboy's comments. Dr. Susan Fairclough, she says, tribes and communities have a history of educating our children through songs, dance, and stories by doing, listening, and watching. But there are limited attempts at the federal and state levels to tap into these funds of knowledge. Culturally responsive teaching and learning provides an important opportunity for educators to acknowledge, celebrate, and incorporate the cultural language histories of children and families they serve. And as Ms. Cara Stewart stated earlier, we're here to speak on behalf of Stacy, but this is true for every ethnicity. At the last meeting, I stated every child wants to they want to hear they want their voice to be heard. And when they are dismissed by their ethnicity, it does something to that child. And I'm speaking from experience. I grew up in a Native population as a young child. My parents moved to a population where there were very few American Indian students. No longer was I Connie, the American Indian girl. I became Connie, the other. And it took me years to overcome that. But I had a 4th grade teacher. When I moved there, I was in the 3rd grade. And the teacher said to me in 3rd grade, "All black boys raise your hands, all white girls, all black girls, all white girls." I never raised my hand. I kept waiting for her to say, because I was in Robeson County and I knew who I was. I was an Indian girl. I never raised my hand. So she just assumed that I was a troubled child. I didn't realize this until I started working on my master's, that I found that I was placed in the special ed program in 4th grade. I always knew that my favorite teacher was my 4th grade teacher, Miss Bethay, because she was the first person that told me I was smart. She was the first person that told me I could accomplish anything. And it's because of her that I stand here today. When I was writing my dissertation, I could still hear her in my mind saying, "Connie, you are smart. You can do this." And sometimes our children, they lose their voice. And I'm here as a member of Stacy and as a member of the Lumbee tribe and a member of the American Indian community and a greater member of the Human Society say, please don't let our children lose their voice. They need their voice. Where are our next steps? Where do we go from here? We want this module to be promoted in the school systems and within DPI. In a meeting yesterday with our CNI team, I shared the module, and I've asked them to place this module on the PD page. Right now it's crunch time, and I don't expect teachers to be jumping into that module because we're worried about testing. But at the beginning of the school year, we're hoping that everybody will take this module. As Ms. Cara said, for Title VI, in the Title VI grant, there is a requirement that all new teachers to a district be informed of the American Indian community and the Title VI grant. So in our district, when we have the beginning teacher meetings, I always go and have the opportunity to share with them about this. But at the next meeting, I'm going to share this module and encourage them to take this module and be aware of what's happening or the knowledge of our American Indian communities. Because sometimes we have people that transfer into our district and they just have no idea of the culture. And they get a culture shock. And it's very difficult. And one other piece I like to share here is we have a lot of best practices that come into our districts. And it works in this county, and so it's supposed to work over here. Well, that's the same way as medicine. My husband is on blood pressure medicine, and so am I. But we take two different types of medicine because we have different DNAs. That's the same way with the culture of the schools. There are different DNAs in the culture, and everything will not work. But I do believe that this module that represents our American Indian students will represent the DNA of all of our American Indians in the state of North Carolina. So we want to share this information not only with our schools and with DPI, but with our American Indian communities. They have a voice. As I said to you earlier, Dr. Brian Brayboy said, there's not an American Indian family who does not want the best for their child. And we want to collect feedback and to continue improve this module. When I was with the North Carolina Teacher Academy, I worked with a module and it was curriculum mapping. Many of you are aware when you have a curriculum map, that's a living document. It continually is updated. And that's the way it is with this module. We need to continually update it. This cannot be a one-time thing and end, so it has to be continually updated. I want to thank you and open the floor for questions or comments.
Questions from my colleagues or comments from, it's a very, very important and useful and invaluable presentation and material and resources. Mr. Alcorn.
Dr. Thank you. I know a couple yoga instructors that could use this. How to sit. Just three things. Is there any controversy around this?
Not that I have heard it. We've opened the module in January, but in December it was sent out to SACE board members to look at and review, and I reviewed the module. And we've asked at our meetings if as I said, it's a living document. If we find that there's something that needs to be tweaked, we have the capacity to do that.
Okay. And is it open to all stakeholders, meaning principals, school board members, the YMCA? It's open for anybody. Is that correct?
So this is housed in Home Base, which is the agency's online way we house professional development for teachers. So you do have to have that login. So it is for any educators who have that login.
Okay.
But for example, like she was talking about, I wanted to share with you all, there is a guest login that we can share with people for limited access, but is it for the general public? No.
But we will share this with the tribes, and I was going to talk with Dr. Stewart about getting that guest login because we want them to be a part of this as well.
Yeah, I'd suggest to cast the net wider as you can, because if it's not controversial and it's as informative as I've just been informed, it'd be great. And plus, even in college curriculum for the education departments there, I mean, this is a resume builder for people going into education to do that. So thank you.
And to your point, Member Alcorn, it's not controversial in that we haven't received cultural feedback. Can cultural responsivity be something that some folks aren't responsive to? Yes, it can be. We have not encountered that, and what we know from research is that cultural responsive education and systems are best practice, and it's something that's been talked about in education for a long time.
Thank you.
I just wanted to, we have not encountered that, but you could hear that. Yes.
If I could comment on the mascot issue that was alluded to during the presentation. We went through that issue in 2005 in our county, and there were two schools that had mascots that were of concern. One was the Red Raiders, and that one was eliminated pretty quickly and changed to Raiders based on even history within the mascot within the school. The other one was the Indians, and it was from the part of our county where, and our county does have an American Indian population in it. It was a part of the county where most of that American Indian population resided. And in the conversation, which was heated in some parts about this, some of the strongest advocates for maintaining the name were the American Indian members of the community who felt that it honored their heritage, and so it was a very difficult discussion. So any pointers that you might have for communities that engage in that type of discussion probably would be worthwhile in guiding a most productive kind of discussion through those issues.
And we have been having that conversation at SACY, and Dr. Oxy and I are from Robertson County, and we have UNCP Braves, we have the Pembroke Warriors, and as you stated, some of those names are, it comes from a prideful perspective for the American Indian population. And some of those will not change probably in our area. And Dr. Oxy and I spoke to that. But we do have that conversation at SACY. Dr. Susan Fairclough is very instrumental in her work with Mascots.
So another thing I wanted to say in response to that is our school, the High Plains Indian School, it was closed in 1962 with assimilation, but my dad still has his old yearbook, and they were the High Plains Warriors. And again, it was a point of pride because every student there was Saponi, every student there was Indian, and that, in that case, is not a misnomer, and it's not a stereotype. And there are some schools out in the Arizona, in the Pueblos, that is the same kind of situation. So in those cases, it is accurate, and it's a point of pride for them.
I'd say listen, the key point is to listen to your communities, because what the research says is that those types of mascots aren't harmful for American Indian students, because they're going to see that warrior, but then they also see Dr. Connie and know, oh, Indians can be doctors, lawyers, what have you. It's where there's no native presence, where that's the only exposure a student has to American Indians, where that's more harmful. So I think you have to consider lots of factors as you go into those discussions, certainly. And Stacey's even kind of debating that one.
Dr. Williamson, did you have a
Yes,
question?
I did. It is interesting, the mindset on a lot of the misconceptions and stereotypes link itself to poverty. We still have people that think students out of poverty automatically bring some type of disability or something, and they teach in that way. So we still have a lot of work and learning to understand about poverty and teaching students out of poverty.
And that's why we have that whole culturally responsive instruction part in the beginning. And what you're saying about the pushback that some people might give at culturally responsive instruction is because they might not be very involved and immersed in that self-recognition, so that they don't understand where it's coming from. Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
I just want to ditto your comment. Yeah, there's just a lot of lack of understanding of poverty, and two quick comments. One is this board, Deanna, you might help us with this. We adopted a resolution back maybe 12, 15 years ago regarding the mascots, and then we were tracking them for a while, and there were significant changes made across the state. That's a local decision, but with some appropriate help. So that, and those numbers, I mean, significant numbers. Also, just the sensitivity, to be candid, we had one in one county that, in one LEA that was called the Warriors, but the women's team were called the Squaws. And, you know, I see everybody taking that gulp. And they had no idea that was the insensitivity of that, and they stopped that in 2006. So the other thing is, just comes to mind, I'm not sure how this fits, but resources matter a lot. And, you know, I had the privilege of writing, participating in the writing, but actually wrote the part of the gaming compact with the Cherokee that established the Cherokee Preservation Foundation. And we literally pull $10 million a year out of gaming profits, and for the preservation, and whether it's language preservation or putting money into the schools for those kinds of preservation, but also now funding a program through Western Carolina University in the School of Education, so that all of that is a part of that, and also just to do some research to assure that things were truth tested. You know, the play Unto These Hills needed some significant changes. Even the headdress that they were using was not even close to being correct. And so a lot of things, the kind of left the Indian Village and the uplift of that, all of those things allowed for a broader understanding of that. I think it fits. They do have some on the reservation. The Cherokee Boys Club has a kind of a revenue stream that helps with a lot of the things as well. So I want to point out that the other thing I would say is I'm sure it's there, but I want to ask just basics. I don't think we should assume that even we could name the 8 recognized tribes. So I'm hoping that module at least starts with assuring that not only can you name them, but it's not cavalier. There are enrolled members, and there's a process, and it's not just some cavalier process that's declared. So I think that's important to because, you know, it's like you said, the Eastern Band is federally recognized. The Eastern Band is state recognized, and there are 7 others state recognized, and that's a process.
And we didn't get into at all the enrollment issue, but that would be a point to
write that down.
Yes.
Right, and we didn't get into state recognized versus federally recognized at all either, but that would also be a point to do. We thought it was more than enough right now to give them those pieces there.
And to speak to your point, Mr. McDavid, we put an update in the annual report, and it's also posted on the website. I just pulled it. In 2002, in that tracking, there was 73 North Carolina schools with American Indian mascots. In 2017, when we checked, that number's gone down to 22.
I'm sorry, one
From
more.
73 in 2002 to 22 in 2017.
Okay, we have 30 seconds.
I would like
I'm sorry, but we have a question.
All right, so I'll be 10, I'll give you 20. So just real quick, I just want to commend the work that you've done specifically around culturally responsive teaching, but just as a challenge moving forward, because, you know, we do have 8 identified tribes in the state. I'd like to see this on a larger scale. Like when we have the collaborative conference in, you know, Greensboro or wherever it's going to be this year, like let's take those opportunities to share this information, because it's some really good stuff that, you know, people are not aware of, and not everybody may, you know, do the modules. I mean, I'm going to be that principal that makes our teachers do the modules, but I think it's some great information needs to be shared on a larger scale.
A couple of final thoughts. I agree 100%. We've got to find a way, and I'm happy to hear you say that, Jason, that you're going to pull that and make that part of your professional development at your school. But the challenge to everyone, Stacey and the board, is to make sure that we've got to have a better way to build awareness around this about this module. So I hope Stacey's already thinking about that. Question, I want to make sure that, I think I heard you say this, but all the tribes, we have representation of all tribes developing the module, is that correct?
Not necessarily, no.
Not necessarily?
No, Stacey formed a committee, and the members of the committee are listed in the acknowledgements at the end of the module, and I think they're listed on your PowerPoint.
I would recommend that the Eastern Band of the Cherokee also play a role in developing and redesigning the module.
Well, there was a representative on Stacey at the time, and that was Kevin Lanning. And she and I both were on, we were still part of Stacey, we just weren't in this particular PD, but all of that information came back. We came back as a group and discussed it. And she actually had the opportunity to view it as well.
Oh, that's good. We're very proud of this product. This is a very concrete, important product that's coming out of Stacey.
I want to end by saying Hawa in the Siouan language means thanks. I thank you from the depths of my heart for every little boy and girl in the state of North Carolina that's American Indian. I thank you for every little boy and girl that's in the state that's not American Indian. I've always been the voice of every child, and I'll thank you that until the day I die. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Oxenstein and presenters, and time for a break, and We're going to take about a 12-minute break.
How you doing today?